100%. At the same time, for your grandparents and for my great-great-grandparents, that did not happen overnight. It took a long time for our families to assimilate and become a part of our culture. And so when we interact with people who appear to be different from us, it becomes so much easier, at least for me, if I understand that these are the three things that they're getting. They're trying to get. Even if I don't understand it, I can act and be more proactive with them if I try to figure out, okay, are they trying to get significance? Are they trying to get belonging? Or if they're trying to get safety? What's going on here? All right? Because I believe this is all that we're trying to get. Does that make sense? Okay. Like I said, I'm going to say things you may agree with or may not agree with, but I at least want you to think about them. Okay? So, any other questions before we move on?
So they're not necessarily coming here.
What I'm saying
I
no.
nothing against them.
No.
This is what we're here to learn.
Yeah, this is exactly what we're here to learn.
I get a sense of, what can I come to America for and get for free, but maybe they're all focused on these three things. But to get that, they need help.
Yeah, they do need help, and they need some education. They need some compassion. They need some other things that our grandparents may or may not have been afforded. Right? I don't like to live too much in the past. We've built on that past, so that's important to recognize. But it's also important to recognize what role I play in building the future, right? And so, just to answer your question, yes. Why did your great grandparents come to the United States? For a better life. Why did Somalis come to the United States? For a better life, right? We have a lot more systems to try to help people and all that kind of stuff, and that may or may not happen. All the aid that we're trying to do may not be helping them. It may be creating dependency on the system. It might be enabling, and all that kind of stuff. But they came for significance, belonging, and safety. Yes, sir.
I think in today's world, where your parents, my parents came, the media wasn't there, so we came with a purpose. In today's world, they come with a purpose for other churches and organizations that allow immigrants to come in. But the media has been mixed with this and diverts some of that direction into feelings that we see and gets us stirred up into politics. And there's a lot of that that's happening, and consequently it goes right back to the immigrant. And the immigrant that comes here, you say, who are you? Well, I'm small. Well, if you're an American, want to be an American, to me, you're an American.
Yeah, but the other part of it,
I don't go say I'm Norwegian or I'm a German. We come to that to build that.
and we're going to talk about that too, as you should.
But I think a lot of that's stirred from media.
Yeah, and I agree. I believe that part of what typically happens, and I don't know if anyone's studied on what happens in refugee camps. So people fleeing war-torn countries that end up in these refugee camps, which are these settlements that gather so they have a safe place until they can be, taken to some safer place than being in a refugee camp. But they watch a lot of movies in refugee camps. They are exposed to media in refugee camps that sometimes it's subtitled, sometimes it's voiced over by someone's interpretation, but not a translation of what's actually happening in the movie. And sometimes, if my only access to America is through movies, what kind of impressions might I get about America? A lot of violence, a lot of shooting, a lot of sex, a lot of drug stuff. And so if I don't have someone deciphering this stuff or putting a context for this stuff, I come here and I'm like, well, yeah, free sex, free drugs, where's my gun? And, and so I think that's part of it as well, that people sometimes come with wrong misconceptions. And on the other side of that, if I come from a very traditional, staunch, religious background, and I see this stuff in a camp or I see this stuff in movies, I'm coming here and I don't like what I see here, right? There was someone did a documentary and it said, it wasn't really a documentary, it was just clips of films, and it said oppressed, right? So it had oppressed, and on one side it had women in burqas and full, with their hijab and their full, totally covered. On the other side, they had all of the Victoria's Secret models. And they just kept showing these two. And they kept saying, the word that kept flashing was oppressed, oppressed. So who's really free and who's really oppressed in the ultimate kind of concept? These women who aren't covered or the women who are covered? And so just that conversation about those two different kinds of ways of being. So when people come from Chicago, what are they trying to get? You said Vikings what?
Memorabilia.
They're trying to get significance, belonging, and safety, right? Even if I don't understand how or why, but there's a geography, there's a certain kind of way I got to act in Chicago that
When it comes up here, it doesn't work.
it doesn't work. And it will only change when what?
When they choose.
When they what? When they realize that behavior from Chicago doesn't work, just like the baby, right? So what that means is that we have to help them understand that that's not kind of how we do things here, right?
That's the language barrier with the Somalians is because they have they don't seem to have the patience that they should have, because if you can't understand them and you ask them to repeat, then their voice gets louder. So it's kind of like they're yelling at you instead of talking normal to you.
Yeah. And they're loud people. I mean, that's just how they talk.
It's usually just the adults, not the kids usually speak English.
Yeah.
It's same with Hispanics.
Yeah. Yeah. It just takes time, right? I'm sure, and it's really funny, and it's really sad. This is really sad to me because in all the trainings that I've done, I discovered this one thing, and it makes me sad. And it makes me sad that there are victims of racism who don't even know who they are, and they're the biggest population of people who are impacted by racism. Who do you think I'm talking about? White people. White people are victims of racism,
Yeah.
right? But it's not the kind of thing that we typically think about or even talk about. Because one of the things, so first of all, what is white? What is white? It's a label, right? And many of our great-grandparents decided that if we're going to be in this country, it's easier to keep our head low, not raise any suspicion about who we are or what we're doing, so we won't use our native language. We won't cook our native foods. We won't hang around with, our native folks. We'll try to fit in as much as possible, and that's how we'll live. What's the bad part about that? You lose your heritage. You lose a huge part of who you are. And so when that starts to happen over generations, we start getting resentful. I don't know about you, but I get resentful when things have been taken away from me that should belong to me, right? And so it's really funny, and I don't know if it happens so